So how do you bring that societal perspective change? That's also equally important to get real good performers to the teaching profession.
Now, children in this village want to become teachers, and parents in this village want their children to become teachers.
Welcome to everyone for another series on Changemakers in Education, Learning from the Leaders. Today we have an eminent personality with us, Ramya Venkataraman, founder and CEO of CENTA. An alumna of IIT Delhi and IIM Calcutta, she worked with McKinsey for 15 years, of which 5 years she worked as heading the firm's education practice in India. After that, she started CENTA, and now she has built the world's largest teacher community and teacher professional development platform out of India. Maybe Ramya, your experience with McKinsey, which is an MNC, or maybe your entrepreneur skill that you have created MNC from India, which is Senda for the world. And thank you for that. And thank you for agreeing to come and do a podcast with us. Welcome, Ramya, for this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Antony. And a real pleasure to be here today in EdIndia's podcast.
Ramya has been recognized widely, including as one of 15 women transforming India by Niti Aayog and United Nations. So it's always a pleasure to discuss with Ramya, and I've been fortunate to be associated with Senda almost from its initial stages. So it's always a pleasure and talking to a friend. So, Ramya, thank you once again. And let's start with what motivated you to establish an organization dedicated to teacher accreditation and now even, I would say, teacher education in general.
So Antony, basically, when, as you said, in my last 5 years of my 15-year McKinsey career, when I was heading our education practice, I used to work a lot on large-scale improvement in systems, large-scale transformation of government systems, of large private education systems. And by that time, this was between 2009 and 2014. And by that time, I would say the country had started understanding that teachers play a central role in quality of education. More broadly in the world also, there was a lot of research related to that. And therefore, there were many initiatives to train teachers. I was also involved in many of those initiatives. So as a country, we used to say that, okay, teachers need to learn these things, teachers need to use certain pedagogies, teachers need to use certain technologies. And with that, they can improve their practice in the classroom and students can learn better. Now, when I interacted with teachers on the ground and gradually as they started getting to know us better, teachers would ask the question, what am I getting out of all this? And the normal answer of society was, don't ask that question. You are in a noble profession. You need to be focusing on only your students learning. And you should not be asking for anything as a professional. And unfortunately, all of society which is saying that to the teacher themselves would want career growth, reward recognition, financial growth, but would tell the teacher not to ask for that. And I started finding this to be more and more of a bottleneck in whatever change we were trying to drive, because it's a very natural question for any professional that, okay, I'll do a good job, but I should also be rewarded along with that. And most of our ancient vocations like medicine, law, etc., are professions in the modern world where we expect the professional to do a good job and we think it is fair for the professional to be rewarded. Whereas in teaching, that whole idea of merit-based reward was missing. And this is what I wanted to change as CENTA. And of course, once this hypothesis became clearer and clearer in my mind, and I was already completing 15 years in McKinsey, so I decided, okay, time has come to take the plunge fully and start my own venture in education. So I ended up setting up CENTA with this objective of making teaching a more aspirational profession and creating career paths, reward, recognition, financial growth for teachers.
No, that's wonderfully here. And yes, definitely, we also believe at EdIndia that teachers play central role in education. Of course, need to have good qualifications, and we can have a lot of connotation attached to it. What does it mean being a teacher? And definitely, you touched upon a very good point that in ancient all medical law, many of these things have come out as a profession, and it's being recognized one of the good career growth that is there. But unfortunately, the teachers, gurus, have stayed in charity mode, and they are expected to do a noble job and not come as a looking at as a professional. And that's something which you are trying to solve. It's fantastic to hear that. But when you look at teaching as an aspirational profession in India as such, there was a study in City University in 2023. Only 7% of high performing students consider teaching as a viable career option.
Yeah.
So, how do you think, how do you attract more and more good students who are knowledgeable with requisite skills coming into the teaching? So that how do you make them as a teaching as an aspirational profession for these students from especially from class two, especially with NEP 2020 coming in after class 12, they have to decide on they have to go for a 4-year program or getting into other career as well. Over to you.
Yeah. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, and I mean that's the crux of the problem that students do not see it as a viable career option. And the way we are addressing this is one, working with employers, both private and government, to help them design career paths for teachers. So employers should want to reward high performing teachers. Now, when let's assume that the employer wants to do that, then the next question becomes for the employer, okay, how do I identify a teacher with very good competencies? And even when you take a small private school, it becomes complicated for the school to identify that internally. Very often, it leads to heartaches and sometimes politics internally when they try to identify. When you look at a large government system, that identification becomes even more complicated, and there are many layers. And how do you figure this out? So we came up with this idea of a certification or accreditation, and which is why we are called Center for Teacher Accreditation, CENTA Private Limited. We came up with this whole idea of a certification or accreditation which would accredit teachers on their competencies. And that certification, that is CENTA certification, serves as a currency for teachers with employers, both private and government. So today there are thousands of private schools across the country which value CENTA certification in their recruiting, in their internal promotion, etc. So when a school, for example, goes to a B.Ed college and they are not able to figure out, okay, who are the students who are good in their competencies, while all of them may have a B.Ed degree, then the school is often using CENTA certification as a metric to say that, yes, I should recruit these students. Similarly, when a government looks at its cadre of teachers and wants to promote them, then there are several states today which are using CENTA certification to identify teachers in specific roles. Some states are using it in an innovative manner, like giving additional points for transfer to teachers who have a CENTA certification, or of course using it in reward and recognition, etc. So these were the two interplaying parts of the problem, which is on one hand working with employers to make them look at merit-based growth, and on the other side creating that currency or certification so that employers are able to do this. And then there is a third angle to this problem, which is that teachers kept coming back to us and saying, okay, this is great. Employers are valuing this certification and I'm willing to take the test. But to take the test, I also need to build my skills. And therefore, you also need to support me with respect to upskilling. And as a result, CENTA also launched 5 years back a very significant initiative on the upskilling side for both in-service and pre-service teachers. And that is the third part of our work, which is teacher education and teacher upskilling. So this is the integrated model around this community of 1.7 million teachers, as you said in the beginning, the world's largest teacher platform. And this is how we are trying to create that aspiration in this profession.
No, it's wonderful to hear about the growth in which is there, and I understand that you have already having, I think, about 10 lakh plus teachers on your platform from India itself, and that's almost, I think, more than 10 percentage of all the teaching population in India at this time. We have almost 9 to 10 million teachers in the country. So that's a really good to start with, and at least they are getting quality resources, quality training, and also I would say accredited through a very well-known agency. But you also talked about in the earlier point about the government taking up various aspects both for recruitment, also even additional points for transfer, etc. And I believe at least 3 to 4 states have already joined hands with you in this venture. Now, when you look at
Actually, 17, no, sorry for the small interruption. Actually, 17 states have been actively supporting this. I would say about 4 of them have formalized it in some way,
yes,
but about 17 states have been giving informal reward recognition and so on.
I think 4 states, I think, have closely worked with you even from recruitment perspective,
Yes,
even the rewards point of view. So
correct,
I'm happy
correct.
to hear that, it is growing in numbers. So from a policy intervention, a lot of policy interventions also you are trying to do. You're working with Niti Aayog and other policy and even NCT as such. So what do you think is a policy intervention that can help shift the whole, societal perspective on teaching as a profession?
I
Because if
think,
you notice, if
yeah,
I can add on to it, because as parents, maybe this is something which I used to talk to my BA students. Or as parents, we always want good teachers in our school when we want, keep our children in the school. But we don't want any of our students, any of our children becoming teachers.
yeah.
So how do you bring that, societal perspective change? Because that's also equally important to get real good performers to the teaching profession.
Yeah, yeah. So Anthony, first, going to your question on policy, I actually think NEP 2020 is a very good start in this context. So there is one fundamental thrust in NEP in Chapter 5 as well as Chapter 15 on merit-based career growth for teachers. And NEP has very explicitly stated this as an objective, as a guideline for states to look at. That is how teachers can grow in their career based on merit. The other thing, again, NEP has stated very clearly is what do we mean by merit? So, in certain countries, there has been this whole thing about should we measure student learning and treat that as merit for teachers. Now, that unfortunately has a lot of issues associated, including conflict of interest as a very direct one. But even if you assume, okay, maybe there is full integrity, even with that, then as a teacher, maybe one might end up focusing on some of the students who are already doing well, not supporting the students who are lagging behind, whereas I should be including everyone in my class. And therefore, more and more globally, there is acceptance that a better way to look at merit is to measure the teacher's own competencies. And NEP has again made that very clear that the way to look at merit is through the teacher's competencies, and those competencies being certified through a testing or assessment of some form. And NEP has even encouraged that people should be able to enter the profession laterally by undergoing a competency certification. Now, of course, to bring some of this to light and to implementation, the one of the next steps taken by NCT was to set up the National Professional Standards for Teachers. And there, of course, I'm extremely glad that as CENTA, we were able to contribute to that very directly, because CENTA standards were started in 2015 and were iterated multiple times. They were also in 2018, 17, 18 taken by Niti Aayog to all the state governments as an example of a teacher competency framework, because India did not have a teacher competency framework at that time. And therefore, when NPST work started in 21, 22, and I've been part of that committee, we were able to bring CENTA standards to bear very directly. And Ministry of Education, NCT, etc., were very keen to learn from that experience, to adopt large parts of CENTA standards, take it into public opinion, and of course, to modify and add on to it based on national context, based on public input, based on some of the additional things we want to emphasize as a country, like constitutional values, etc. But a lot of the technical core of NPST, we were able to contribute because of several years of experience before that. And that's something we are extremely glad about as an organization, and glad that this has now become a national level standard as NPST. So this leads to implementation on the policy side in terms of what does competency based career growth actually mean. So that's a bit of a long answer to your question on policy, but that's the direction we see it heading. I think you had another whole question on society, and happy to share a couple of thoughts on that, or come back to it as you suggest.
Can share on perspectives. How do you look at societal perspective as such also?
Yeah. And which is why probably that question came to your mind when you talked about policy as well. But policy partly helps, because when the country states that we want to make teaching aspirational, when the government states that teaching careers should be based on merit, should be based on competencies, and should not be based only on seniority or other factors, then society starts seeing this as a national agenda. That is one. Second, of course, the market has to play a role, and which is where we call it a sort of market driven change. So ultimately, parents want their children to do well in life, and if parents find that in the 90s that software engineering has become a significant profession, then all parents encourage their children to look at software engineering. Now, similarly, let's say in the 2020s or 2030s, parents find that teaching is getting a lot of career growth, is getting recognition, is getting earnings, then parents will encourage their children. And I just want to, give a small incident, share a small story in this context, that in 2019, as one of the outcomes of our annual competition, CENTA International Teaching Professionals Olympiad, we had West Indies cricketer Brian Lara rewarding the winners in Dubai. One of the winners was a government teacher from Telangana, from a small village in Peddapalli district, I think, who went abroad, in fact, for the first time, got rewarded by Brian Lara. When he came back, the village, and this teacher's name was Srinivas, when he came back, the village panchayat organized a function in his honor. complete with posters, cutouts, everything. And after that function, he wrote a Facebook post in Telugu, which we translated and understood. And he actually wrote saying that he was incidentally the winner of the Telugu medium track of International TPO. And he wrote a post in Telugu saying that now children in this village want to become teachers, and parents in this village want their children to become teachers. So that is how aspiration is created in society. And when you see that by being a teacher, you went and met Brian Lara, and none of us in the panchayat or anybody else in the village has met him, and you got that opportunity by being a teacher, then the profession starts becoming aspirational. So this is the kind of change we want to see. And I do believe that NEP 2020 and NPST will play a big role in contributing and driving this change.
No, I think these are very great points that you brought about that truly the recognition and reward and making that as a public phenomena so that it becomes much easier for youngsters to aspire for. Because most of the time, not necessarily all of them are after salary. And as far as teachers are concerned, with the seventh pay commission and now eighth pay commission going to be there, it's a decent salary. But unfortunately, all private schooling system, or even for that matter, even the public school education system, because of this idea of ad hoc system, contract system, they all are not getting that particular seventh pay commission and eighth pay commission. But at least from a theory point of view, yes, there is a seventh pay commission for teachers. But and I think bringing teachers' competency is very beautiful because many of the school considers as good if your result is 100 percentage results, 100 percentage getting more than 90 percentage and so on and so forth. And you and I know that board exam assessment is not in the right approach at this time because many boards are competing with each other to get 100 percentage pass or getting more than 90 percentage, 99 percentage. So much so that I remember, I don't know, somebody told me in one of the central university, the cutoff for the college admission was 101 percentage. But I think immediately they took it out because people started asking how is it possible to get. Now I don't know whether it is true, but many of the colleges, if you look at in Central University, 99.99 is the cutoff, and in English to get 100, it's quite interesting. Or for that matter, in languages in general, to get 99 and 100, it's quite interesting. But getting now students outcome as especially from the school student learning, it's a very welcome change. We need to look at the teacher competency and see how do we reward and recognize them in public forums more and more. And you have talked about one example in Telangana. I'm sure you will have more example like that
Yeah.
already. You're already there, so I hope. I'm not sure exact number of villages that we have in the country. I hope CENTA will get one teacher in all the villages in our country, rewarded by Brian Lara or Shah Rukh Khan or any other, eminent personality that people look up to. And so that, we need to bring teaching as an aspirational profession. So when we talk,
I totally, I totally look forward to, that kind of penetration. And yeah, I mean, we are present all over the country right now in 7,000 locations. I just want to come back to one quick thing before you move on, which is this point about the seventh pay commission and teacher salaries, etc. Right? What we are finding in our experience is that irrespective of uh, which pay commission or what average salary, etc. And there is a wide variation naturally, at least in the private system, and private system is quite significant in our country.
yeah,
Very often, it is not the average that bothers as much as the lack of differentiation. So very often you find that students end up even choosing in careers which may have an average salary that is not very different, or that may even be lower. There are many parts of call center roles, there are many parts of delivery agent roles, etc., where average salaries won't be different or will be lower. Whereas very often teachers or teaching is not chosen because of the feeling of a dead end. So a lot of students feel that, okay, in many other careers, I can grow. And there will be some differentiation based on my performance. Whereas in teaching, even if I've done a good job, even if I'm showing great competencies, I'm not getting rewarded in a differential manner compared to the person next door. And that causes a lack of aspiration, and which is what we are trying to bring about through this accreditation, rather than the average salary, which may not be bad.
Right. And I think that point on lack of differentiation is, I think, which must be one of the game changer with NPST coming in and bringing in the three levels of proficiency, advanced, and expert. And there's a possibility that that will be also used for their promotion and salary differentiation as well. And hopefully that there is no question of PRT, TGT, PGT. All teachers start with the same level, because according to me, the best teacher should be at the PRT level, because that's really the foundation of learning that happens. If you don't have the best teachers over there, then whatever you do at the end without foundation learning, it's of no use. Yes, Ramya, you wanted to say?
I mean, I'm not even comparing, to add to what you said. Each of these levels is a specialization.
Yes.
So, moving from primary to secondary is only a growth for the student. As far as the teacher is concerned, it is about becoming a better primary teacher, and growing in your abilities as a primary teacher, being able to do lesson planning for others, being able to coach others, or becoming a better secondary teacher, growing in your abilities there, being able to coach others, etc. So these are valid parallel career paths, and which is again something that NEP states very clearly.
Yeah, it's true. As education sector is going through multiple battle. Apart from teaching as an aspirational profession, within teaching profession, you need to say that PRT, TGT, PGT is not a career growth. It is a different level of teaching, and unfortunately, in our system, even the salary has been kept in such a way that PRT is paid low, TGT and PGT has been given a differentiation. But hopefully, with this new policy that is coming up, the transformation will take place, because every level has its own specialization. And as I was saying earlier, the PRT, the primary teachers who are at the foundational classes, they are the most important according to me, because that really shapes the impetus for learning among the students. So now that we are with the students, we talk about a lot of child-centric and future learning models that we talk about. So from a teacher, teaching strategy or teacher education perspective, how do you think that teachers adopt, especially from online education that we all of us are imparting?
Sure. So, when we look at teacher education, we believe very strongly in a hybrid model. So, a pure online model is not likely to impart the full set of skills. And when I say hybrid, I'm not necessarily talking about the training being in person. That can be in person, that can be online, but the training being interwoven with actual implementation in the classroom. So most of our trainings as CENTA is structured in a manner that you will learn something, whether you learn it online or in an in-person workshop, but essentially you're learning something in a classroom setting. You will go back and try to implement that in your own classroom or in an internship classroom that has been assigned to you. And then you will come back to the next session to say that, okay, what I learned, I was able to implement or I was not able to implement, why, or I agree with it or disagree with it in my context. And therefore, now these are the next things I want to learn. So, this cycle of theory and practice or classroom and practice is what we are trying to drive, even in a tech-enabled manner. For that matter, even in our in the platform where there are micro learning resources, including a lot of free resources that teachers engage on. Our thrust has become more and more to say, okay, you are looking at this micro resource which is taking you 5 minutes to quickly absorb. But what we want is for you to try and implement it in a classroom, come back and upload something, see what the community's reaction to that is. If you have some query, then ask the community, let them give input on that. So, some teacher from some part of India might raise a query, some teacher might from Philippines or Nigeria might say, why don't you look at it this way? And you get a completely new perspective from another culture, or somebody in your own setting might say, okay, this is what we have done. So this whole aspect of classroom practice, and maybe I would put the community as the third leg of that, a community of practice coming together, is how we see the future of teacher education, and teachers being able to bring various child-centric models into their own classroom.
No, it's very good, nice way of putting it across. Sometimes people misunderstand online education means it's very disengaged from a model because there is someone delivering a webinar or maybe a course that needs to be printed. And I'm sure that all of us are aware that how online training has happened in the country, especially after COVID. Teachers tend to switch on the video and go off for their work and then come back and attempt the post assessment. So I think the point that you talked about community of practice, uploading some of the like an assignment based is going to be the way forward online education, and it also helps in attempting the large scale problem, because the current scenario that we are facing in our country, nearly 50% of students lack foundational literacy skills by grade 5. So it's not a small problem that we are facing with. And of course, there are so many agencies, government, everybody is trying to make an effort with the Nipun Bharati mission has come. A lot of foundational skill development program that is taking place. But how do you feel, with this such a large scale program? What are the large scale initiatives that needs to happen to solve this particular challenge of FLM to start with? We have so many years in education sector, we are still having a problem with the foundational learning literacy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one, of course, I'm quite glad to see the focus on FLN. I think for a long time, FLN has been thought about as something that anyone can teach, or something that doesn't involve any significant skills, etc. But I think the focus that has come on FLN through for example, the Nipun Bharat mission, as you mentioned, also the work of various organizations, foundations like Central Square Foundation, and various implementing organizations. That focus is very good. And in fact, as CENTA, we launched the CENTA standards for FLN teachers specifically 4 5 years back. And three of the state governments have adopted these standards under the Nipun Bharat mission. And we also run training related to that, and we are also involved in a national level research on that. But what is needed to really do this at scale? Again, I would come back to some of the things we were discussing. If you look at the challenges of teaching being aspirational, as you rightly said a few minutes back, in the case of FLN, that challenge is even more accentuated, because we treat FLN as a level that should receive even lower salaries. In fact, in the government system, it has largely been part of Anganwadis, which are more related to care rather than being part of the education system related to building foundational literacy and numeracy. And now that integration, many of the states are looking at. So particularly in FLN, how do you bring this whole idea of aspiration? And given that the teacher competency standards are relatively less defined over there, I think it is actually an opportunity to define the technical skills needed for an FLN teacher, and to appropriately reward teachers who are able to demonstrate that kind of technical skill.
Yes, I think the point that you have been stressing is setting standards and rewarding and recognizing. That will be a game changer. But there has been another game changer that has been recently coming in, AI in education. And of course, when we talk to the teachers, I always say teachers can never be replaced. And at India, we believe that teachers can never be replaced, but teachers who may not understand technology can be replaced. Can be replaced. So, what's your take on perspective on AI in education? There was so much of hue and cry when ChatGPT came in, and students started giving the assignments overnight. Rather ChatGPT is doing a lot of assignments for the students. And what's your take or your perspective on AI in education?
So I think AI definitely has transformative power, and like many technologies of the past, the power depends on using it wisely. And I do hope, as a society, we head in the right direction on that. Very hard to predict how it will go. But as I see it for teachers, in particular, there are certain aspects of lesson planning, student assessment design, uh, pattern recognition for students. These are some of the areas where AI can play a very interesting role. So, for example, we have a simple tool, CENTA AI, where a teacher can pick a particular topic and quickly generate a lesson plan, and it saves a lot of time for the teacher. Now we are trying to build the tool in a manner that the teacher should also change the lesson plan, adapt it to his or her context, etc. Now, how do we motivate enough teachers to also make those changes and not take that lesson plan blindly becomes the next question of implementation. Similarly, when you look at student assessment, we have a worksheet generation tool which rides on OpenAI, and the a teacher can very quickly generate a worksheet picking any topic. The teacher can also modify the difficulty level, modify Bloom's level of different questions, etc. But again, for me, the most important aspect is not the clicking the button to generate, but taking the interest to make those modifications so that you regenerate and create a worksheet that is relevant in your context for your class. And therefore, using AI tools needs to go hand in hand with building the fundamental competencies of lesson planning, student assessment, classroom communication, etc. So that you as a teacher then decide, okay, this is where the AI tool is going to be useful for me. This is how it is working well. This is where I'm not going to use it, etc. I mean, for example, when this whole multimedia wave came in, right, probably 20 years back, and I think it still continues. When this whole multimedia wave came in, we even got into a scenario where we may show a leaf or a tree on a picture rather than just showing outside the window and saying, there is a tree. So we should not go in that direction where we start using technology in a ridiculous manner. And that's why this combination of tech tools with the teacher being competent in how to use them, that combination becomes important. Now, of course, there is another angle, which is AI direct to students, and particularly in senior secondary and higher education. I do think that there will be parts of education where there can be a good supplemental role played by AI in terms of adaptive learning and reinforcement of concepts, checking where students stand, etc. I don't think it's ideal to be direct to students in primary, middle school, etc. I think there are several health hazards of being direct to student in early grades. But in senior secondary and higher education, I do think there are parts of education where AI can also be direct to students.
No, I think apart from health hazard that you talk about, especially at the lower grades, World Economic Forum Study 24 also found that student engagement drops by 40% in
Yeah.
fully AI-driven classrooms without human interaction.
Yeah.
So there are, we recently we heard some news that some of the schools have introduced robo, to talk about, and the children start talking. It becomes like a kind of a fanfare rather than promoting education. So I think you rightly brought that particular point. Yes, AI and teachers can coexist in classroom, and you give a lot of examples, which I feel, if I can classify it, a lot of academic administrative duties which the teacher is doing, whether it is making a lesson plan or a worksheet or an assessment. All those things can be used or accelerated with the use of technology and AI in education per se. So definitely there should be a balance. Without that human interaction, it is not possible. There are different types of schooling coming in. First 1 or 2 hours, they are closed up in booths to talk about, learn by themselves 1 to 2 hours, and then focus on various other skills. Nobody is no nobody's removing that school aspect as such. That's where a lot of life skills are learn. A lot of no a lot of other competencies are developed among students, especially those things which are related to social skills. But even other cognitive skills, you need that particular group to think and start debating to get that particular, as we say, fully human being, fully alive person coming out of our school education system,
Yeah.
which will also bring about more on the more improve the employability skills, because we see that in the recent study, there's hardly 50-60 percentage of them are employable, of our graduates or MBAs or engineers. Remaining are not employable. That's largely because our school education doesn't focus too much on skill transfer. There are islands of hope, some good private school or some good government school promoting these life skills. But when we talk about 1.4 million school, they are literally not drop in the ocean. Because recently I was in one of the conference where the so-called elite schools or progressive school, as some people call it, were assembled, and they say, no, we are doing this and it's fantastic, and education in India is going through. I asked them only one question. When you talk about these type of schools, actually, how many numbers you're talking about? Is it 3,000, 10,000, 1 lakh? They said, no, it will not be 1 lakh, it will be much less. I said, vis-a-vis 1.4 million school that's in the country, then how do you put it across? Because that was an eye opener for them, saying that many of the private schooling system is talked about doing fantastic work. But there is, as you said earlier, 40% roughly are the private school. But all those 40% of the private schooling system in the country are not promoting such quality education as given by some of the private schools. So just like in private school, there are some very good schools promoting skills and values. Also in the government system, there are very, very good schools which are there. So that image of only private school system can help you is also one of the things which is troubling the parents' mind. So you will find a lot of exodus coming from government schooling to private school, but in some state we can see a reverse migration or reverse enrollment, if I can put it across. Now, do you think that this particular challenge, where especially the private school taking some of this AI in education as another tool to make another additional fees, vis-a-vis government school not having enough resources to put in this technology platforms or technology hardwares from that point of view. Now, how do you think, as a policy front, we need to make a balance between availability of resources vis-a-vis use of technology, even vis-a-vis perception of private school better than government school system?
You asked very many large questions, but touching
This
upon
is
the
actually a out of syllabus question. I did not have this question in mind, but when you brought this point, I thought it's a good to ask you, because you work in large scale, so it's good to pick your brain on that.
So coming to the point on resources and technology, right? So actually the cost of technology is coming down over time, as you're aware. And in fact, a lot of it is less related to hardware, etc., and more related to network and bandwidth. So in fact, we are running a very large scale test next month in one of the states, and as the government is plan. It's a test which is going to be run in physical centers, of course, on devices, but in physical centers. And as the government is planning the test with us, they are finding that space is not a constraint, device is not a constraint, but the network in a lot of places is going to be able to accommodate only a certain number of teachers at a time. So increasingly, and of course, network is growing. Cost of network is also coming down, as we know. So increasingly, the resources needed for technology penetration are not becoming as complicated or prohibitive. I think it comes down a lot more to understanding implementation and understanding what is the right way to support the teacher and support the student in the classroom. So whether you take government schools or you take private schools, there is a lot of blind adoption of technology, as I call it. So technology for technology's sake, right? So for me, technology should be treated like pen and paper. That yes, at some point we needed pen and paper to transmit our thoughts rather than just transmitting them orally. And today we are saying, okay, we need technology for various aspects. And pen and paper is one example, or you think of any other tool, right? So it's a tool. So technology being treated as a tool with the end outcome clearly being student learning, and one step before that, the teacher being able to operate in a certain way in the classroom. If we have that kind of thoughtful adoption of technology, the resource requirement is actually not that high. And I don't personally see that to be the driving constraint. Coming to your other question, the perception of government schools, private schools, etc. I mean, that is a much more complex problem, and sort of much more deep rooted. And I think the way I would put it is that one, each of these systems needs to become more and more responsive to the market's requirements. So, for example, today you see a lot of governments, state governments, trying to understand what parents are looking for, trying to address that, whether it is, for example, learning English language along with your schooling, or learning vocational skills in secondary, various things. What are parents looking for, and how do you cater to that? Similarly, on the on the private school side, understanding what parents want, and addressing that. And one of these things then also comes down back to the quality of teachers. So again, in the both in the private school and the government school system, one of the things that parents want is good quality teachers, as you said. But both these systems don't have a very easy way of communicating to their parent audience that we have good quality teachers. So very often they end up saying that our board exam marks are 99.9, or whatever else, rather than saying that our teacher quality is meeting a certain standard. So how do these systems adopt or respond to market needs and communicate that response, and therefore start changing perceptions that can stereotype a government system or a private system, and start having more nuanced views that this particular school is a good school, this particular set of teachers are doing a good job, and I just cannot paint like with a common brush an entire system. So this is a complex problem, and I don't think this is going to be solved overnight. But hopefully, the efforts that all of us are making in this direction will help.
Thank you, Ramya. I have more questions, but I think time is already is very much limited at this time. So I think in the last 45 minutes, we have been talking about mainly those two questions. If I can bring it in a summary form, how do you make teaching as an aspirational profession, and how do you make teachers better prepared to be in the classroom so that students can be engaged and they can be a good human being prepared for life when they move out of the school system. Any closing remarks that you have before we wind up?
I think it was a great discussion, Anthony, and enjoyed speaking with you on this topic. And I would simply say, if there are teachers and aspirational teachers who see this episode, I would love for them to understand that the profession is changing. More and more opportunities are coming in. More and more employers are looking at competency-based growth. So yes, take up this profession with full enthusiasm and keep building your competencies to keep growing as a professional.
Thank you, Ramya, for that passing message. I would like to just add on a few more points to that, because this is one message which I used to talk to all the B.Ed college students. All of you, all of the teachers who are there, or even the would-be teachers going to see this podcast, teachers are who can make or break someone's life. When you are studying, teaching in a classroom of 30, 35 students, don't think that you are just 30, 35 students. They are 35 future families. And in that way, you're contributing to the nation, and as you are a nation builder. It's no more a charitable profession. Teaching is no more a charitable profession. And teachers can make a difference. Teachers can make a change. So just like we have a change maker in education, Ramya with us, each of the teachers out there can make a difference, provided you believe in it, provided you start taking one step at a time, upskilling yourself, and being proud of what you're doing. Thank you once again, Ramya, for joining us. Thank you, and bye bye.
Thank you very much, Anthony.